Did you spot the planet that was inspired by another famous sci-fi movie world? Or realize that this Star Wars story was actually missing some rather iconic pieces of Star Wars history? Well, those are just a few of the brilliant, easily missed Rogue One elements that likely managed to get past your senses. Gareth here, this is What Culture Star Wars, and here are 20 things you somehow missed in Rogue One, a Star Wars story. Number 20, it was the first Star Wars movie without a Wilhelm Screamer. Since making its Star Wars debut all the way back in 1977, the iconic Wilhelm Scream had been present in absolutely every single big screen offering set in the galaxy far, far away. But you may not have realized that the days of the legendary sound, first heard in 1951's Distant Drums appearing in this franchise, sadly came to an end heading into Rogue One, with The Last Jedi supervising sound editor Matthew Wood telling ABC News that the series was moving away from the much-loved Scream and letting the past die, as Kylo Ren put it. Despite seemingly being retired from the big screen corner of the galaxy though, that still didn't stop Robert Rodriguez from sneaking in a cheeky Wilhelm during the final episode of the Book of Boba Fett. You just can't keep a good Star Wars trope down. Number 19, a Clone Wars turbo tank is used to transport Jyn. Ever wonder what happened to all that clone trooper kit in the wake of the Clone Wars coming to an end? Well, as easily missed during the early stages of Rogue One, it turns out some of the military vehicles in particular went from being used to transport clones into battle to carrying prisoners to various locations. An HCVW A9 turbo tank used by the Galactic Republic during the aforementioned battles is actually holding Jyn Erso in the moments before she's rescued by the Rebel Alliance on Wobani, with this on-screen appearance actually being its first in the Star Wars universe. The tank would then go on to appear in The Bad Batch in the coming years, with similar HAVW A6 juggernauts also being present during the likes of Revenge of the Sith and the Clone Wars animated series. Simply put, the Empire didn't let these rolling Clone War relics go to waste. Number 18, a subtle Obi-Wan reference. And while on the subject of the planet Jyn Erso was imprisoned and forced to work for an Imperial labor camp on, the name Wobani actually subtly references one of the most iconic figures this galaxy has ever known. That's right, this planet's title is an anagram of none other than the bloke fond of greeting friends and foes with a cheeky hello there himself, Obi-Wan Kenobi. Unsurprisingly, this wasn't the only often overlooked Rogue One reference to the big screen Star Wars tales that came before it. Number 17, the homages to the original trilogy dialogue. Rogue One clearly boasts K2SO attempting to pay homage to Luke Skywalker's first utterance of the soon-to-be well-known phrase, "I have a very bad feeling about this in A New Hope," before getting unceremoniously cut off by Jyn and Cassian. How rude! But while this original trilogy verbal tribute stuck out like a sore thumb, you may not have spotted a few other far less obvious tributes to some of the OG trilogy's awesome dialogue over the course of this Star Wars trilogy. Saw Gerrera did his best Admiral Akbar impression, letting out a swift "It's a trap" on Jeddah, and Andor also ordered K2SO to punch it, as the team fled the blasted planet. A nod to Han Solo and Lando's very same cool as all hell lines to Chewbacca in The Empire Strikes Back. Number 16, Edu was inspired by Alien. Gareth Edwards actually decided to look to another iconic piece of sci-fi when designing one of the many fascinating worlds on show in Rogue One. While it may not have been fully apparent when first taking in the titular crew's attempts to find Jyn's father Galen on the planet Edu, it's pretty hard to unsee the similarities once you learn that the director was massively inspired by Alien's LV-426 during its creation. This moon, containing ominous rocks and a misty blue atmosphere, was one of the first places to be infested by the terrifying xenomorphs in the series, whereas in Rogue One, Edu was overrun with a slightly less frightening empire. Number 15, a New Hope footage was mixed into the action. As the Rebel Alliance finally saw into the action above Scarif late on, the various squadron leaders report to Admiral Radis, and it's here when a rather incredible and potentially missed piece of movie-making magic seamlessly drops into the sequence. The red and yellow leaders seen here by the name of Garvin Drace and John Vander respectively were very much played by the same actors who brought these characters to life in the Battle of Yavin seen in A New Hope. This all came about when Edwards went for a tour around Skywalker Ranch, with the director stumbling on a bunch of not fully digitalized film from the first Star Wars flick all those years ago. The unused episode 4 dialogue spoken by Drew Henley and Angus McKeens was then worked into the script, and the two OG trilogy faces were sensationally inserted into the cockpit seen in Rogue One by the magicians at ILM. Number 14, some familiar Cantina faces. Similarly to an unfortunate Luke Skywalker back in Mos Eisley's Cantina during the events of A New Hope, Jyn actually comes into contact with creepy cosmetic surgeon Dr. Cornelius Evazan and his Aqualish pal Ponda Baba on the streets of Jeddah City. It's a brief collision, and Andor swiftly extinguishes any potential conflict before many folks even properly realised exactly who had been bumped into by Urso. But that is very much Baba and Evazan up to no good in the Holy City. What sort of criminal activity, you ask? Well, Number 13, one of the most disturbing characters in Star Wars history briefly appears. Far from just being a pair of drunken thugs looking for a fight in local watering holes, Dr. Cornelius Evazan and his pal Ponda Baba were responsible for one of the most horrifying creations ever to walk across a Star Wars surface. After already experimenting on a number of living beings whilst working for Crimson Dawn's Dryden Voss, stripping them of their personalities and transforming them into subservient slaves via cybernetic technology, Dr. Evazan and Baba were at it again in Jeddah City later down the road. This time, Evazan had been taking injured victims of the local insurgency and once again turning them into more disturbing decraniated creations, selling them off to act as servants for the rest of their days. And in a blink-and-you'll-miss-it cameo of sorts, one of these poor souls was actually briefly visible just as Saw Gerrera's partisans targeted the Imperials occupying the Holy City in Rogue One. Number 12, we see you, Blue Milk. After first being poured into the galaxy within the Lars family homestead during episode 4, Blue Bantha Milk has made a habit of showing up in everything from prequel entries to Star Wars animated series over the last few decades. It even managed to sneakily wiggle into the opening stages of this Star Wars story too. With so much drama going on within the Urso household as director Krennic suddenly decided to drop in for a surprise visit, it's easy to miss the big old jug of the blue stuff on the dining table just as a panicked Lyra gets in contact with Saw Gerrera. Number 11, Red 5 not surviving sets the stage for an iconic figure to take their place. In episode 4, Luke Skywalker eventually joins the Rebel Alliance's Red Squadron as the heroes look to take out the Empire's Death Star. The lad who ultimately helped bring an end to the Galactic Empire famously took up the call sign of Red 5, of course, and in a development that some failed to catch during a first viewing, the Star Wars story before A New Hope actually shows why that position was available. Not long after calling out his number and asking for assistance, a TIE fighter blasts Pedring Gol to smithereens above Scarif. This confirmed that Luke took the call sign of a brave pilot who was gunned down trying to help Jyn and co steal the superweapon plans that would aid the next Red 5 in taking out the Death Star in the not too distant future. Number 10, some of the trailer's best shots didn't make it into the movie. Gareth Edwards' flick grabs you by the scruff of your neck and refuses to let go for a gripping 2 hours. And that's largely why many didn't realise a number of the brilliant shots seen in Rogue One's trailers hadn't actually made it into the finished cut a good few hours after they witnessed Darth Vader butcher a corridor full of rebels. Everything from scenes showing off a bald Saw Gerrera to a damn TIE fighter suddenly greeting Jyn high above the surface of Scarif was surprisingly nowhere to be found in the finished flick, despite being present in trailers and teaser footage. Edwards would also later explain that the brilliant shot of Felicity Jones' Jyn being gradually lit up whilst dressed in Imperial disguise during a teaser was actually little more than a product of the crew's daily indie hour, a time when the team could play about and shoot whatever they wanted. The director spotted someone flicking on the lights as Jones was walking to film her next shot and felt it was too wonderful a visual to waste. They had absolutely no clue how to fit it into the picture, but it worked a treat as the teaser's memorable closing shot. Number 9, the first live-action Star Wars movie without an opening crawl. In an unprecedented but easily overlooked move at the time, this spin-off actually became the first film in the franchise's history not to begin with some traditional yellow words tumbling to the sound of John Williams' magnificent main theme. Now, Rogue One did still boast the iconic long time ago silent opening shot, but despite writer Gary Whitta actually creating one for Edward's Star Wars story, a piece of text that remarkably contained the exact number of words as Episode 4's, the call was ultimately made to keep this standalone entry crawlless. Number 8, Gareth Edwards' crew snuck some monsters into Saw Gerrera's cave. Before stepping into the worlds of Star Wars, Gareth Edwards spent a bit of time dealing with big screen monsters, directing both 2014's Godzilla reboot and the sci-fi horror known as Monsters. So as a way of cheekily saluting the director's history of working with various giant creatures on screen, the Rogue One crew decided to throw a few monster Easter eggs into Saw Gerrera's cave. Edwards had no clue, and actually only first spotted one of the numerous cave paintings of the likes of Godzilla, the Mutos, and creatures from Monsters in the middle of a take. Hell, even the mind behind this flick initially missed these rather sneaky, monstrous Easter eggs, folks. Number 7, Sam Whitworths' ongoing T15 gag. On top of being the voice behind the legendary Maul in the likes of the Clone Wars and Rebels animated series, Sam Witwer has also secretly made his presence felt in a number of other Star Wars projects. In fact, according to the actor himself when speaking at Star Wars Celebration 2022, Witwer actually went out of his way to drop an incredibly easy-to-miss ongoing gag into this galaxy far, far away in Rogue One. After hearing the stormtroopers on the Death Star talking about a BT-16 in A New Hope, Witwer opted to add another reference to this sort of tech in the prequel story. Listen closely as a pair of troopers wander around Scarif, and you'll hear Witwer mentioning how the T-15s have been marked obsolete. And once you catch that, go and search for the many other subtle Stormtrooper T conversations in the likes of The Rise of Skywalker and Obi-Wan Kenobi. Number 6, the nod to George Lucas's original Force line. Many different variations of Star Wars' legendary May the Force be with you line have been uttered by everyone from Jedi Masters to defiant rebel forces throughout the franchise's history. But there was actually a time when this well-known phrase looked a little different, with George Lucas actually opting for May the Force of others be with you in earlier drafts of the first Star Wars. So as a hiding in plain sight reference to that alternate reality where this OG version of the line showed up all over the galaxy, the blind guardian of the Whills known as Chirrut Imwe can be heard greeting folks in Jeddah City with that early draft Force line instead. Number 5, the Darksaber tease. Easily one of the most important and unique weapons used by many a Mandalorian and Force wielder in the Star Wars universe, the Darksaber had been making a mark on the galaxy long before it showed up in The Mandalorian a few years ago. And in a throwaway reference to this ancient blade being very much at the forefront of the Empire's mind in particular at the time of Rogue One, this weapon was actually alluded to during Jyn and Cassian's search for the Death Star plans. As the two are flicking through the Imperial data files on Scarif, Jyn confirms the presence of a black saber file. This quick reference seemingly hinted at the Empire's interest in the unmistakable lightsaber, sometime before it was revealed that Imperial warlord Moff Gideon had eventually taken it from Bo-Katan Kryze during the Great Purge of Mandalore. Number 4, the Ghost Crew cameos. Star Wars Rebels Hera Syndulla is finally set to make her live-action debut in this year's Ahsoka series. But did you know the Twi'lek captain of the Ghost Crew actually briefly made her presence felt during the events of Rogue One too? Whilst on Yavin 4, a General Syndulla is told to report to the briefing room over the Tannoy, as Jyn storms off from a council who refuse to risk it all to get their hands on the Empire's Death Star plans. And that isn't the only easily missed Rebels cameo on show in the flick, with the Ghost ship itself being present in the Yavin hangar and during the Battle of Scarif. Also, the mischievous astromech known as Chopper scooted on by for a spell, rolling across the screen as news of the Rogue One group taking a trip to Scarif made its way to the Rebel base. Number 3, Gerrera's crew are playing analog Dedric. Jumping back to Saw Gerrera's cave base of operations on Jeddah now, and to the unexpected return of one of the oddest games in the galaxy. Just after Cassian, Chirrut Imwe and Baze Malbus are dumped into a cell within the Partisan headquarters, a number of said Gerrera allies can be seen having a laugh playing an analog version of Dedric. Said game, one that usually involves two people battling one another with creatures on a board, debuted all the way back in 1977, with a hologram version of the bizarre pastime first being played by R2-D2 and a petulant Chewbacca on the Millennium Falcon during A New Hope. Number 2, Rian Johnson's cameo trade. None other than The Last Jedi director Rian Johnson also found a way to secretly wiggle into the Rogue One action. As the Empire fire up their planet-zapping super laser on the Death Star, the two blokes in charge of pulling the levers to make that possible were in fact played by both Johnson and producer Ram Bergman. The guys behind Episode 8 and Knives Out apparently chose those figures because they knew they simply could not be cut from the story, with their presence being vital if this Death Star was going to produce its big green blast of doom. And in return, Johnson only went and threw Gareth Edwards into The Last Jedi too. That's the Rogue One creator giving a Resistance trooper a funny look after they bizarrely chose to taste Crate's salty surface. How weird. Number 1, Mustafar is the only location not identified with a title card. When landing on the various planets seen in Rogue One for the first time, each of said worlds is given a clear title card, which lets audiences know exactly where they're about to touch down on. Well, for the most part. Though you probably didn't spot it in the moment, there was actually a place that wasn't introduced via title card during the runtime. A rather fiery and familiar location by the name of Mustafar. Yep, the same place where Anakin got all crispy. This was all very much intentional, with writer Gary Whitta noting that this was done to preserve the mystery of that location, and not make it obvious that Darth Vader was about to rock up. Even with it being known beforehand that Vader was set to wreak havoc at some point in the flick, fans weren't sure when and where he would arrive. And thanks to the lack of titles here, his back-to-tank return amidst the flames of Mustafar was that little bit more impactful. And that is our list. Know any other things that people somehow missed in Rogue One, a Star Wars story? Well, let us know all about them in the comment section down below, and don't forget to like, share, and click on that subscribe button while you're down there. Also, if you like this sort of stuff, then please head on over to whatculture.com and find some more fantastic Star Wars articles, just like the one this video you're watching right now is based on. I've been Gareth from What Culture Star Wars. May the Force be with you, and hopefully I'll see you soon. Bye-bye!